In 1198, deep in what is today France, the Viscount of Lemoynes, Adhemar, had found gold on his land, and the claim being that it was enough to make a 1-to-1 scale model of a Roman family at a dinner table. Adhemar himself was a vassal of the Duke of Guinea, and so Adhemar gave him what he thought was a fair take from his find, and went no further beyond that. How it was possible that Adhemar could do such a thing was that he had a status bestowed upon his rank, which was the right of the treasure trove, and in more modern terms you can just call it medieval mineral rights. The king at the time was Richard the Lionheart, and when he heard news about this he was rather put off. Originally he had hoped that he'd receive a small part of the claim, but now he went and issued that the whole thing belonged to him, regardless of the right of the treasure trove. All in all, this leads to the siege of the castle of Chalus in the year 1199. Richard was definitely more prepared, showing up to the small castle with a force of about 1,000 men, most of them from the nobility ranks. When the defenders saw the banner of Richard the Lionheart unfurl, they offered to open the gates to the castle and surrender without a fight. But Richard's mood was defiant, and he claimed, "No, since you have forced me to unfurl my banner, I shall only enter by breach, and all of you shall be hung from the battlements." Not much information is known about the siege, but they did well enough to make Richard impatient. One evening in particular, Richard found himself in his tent, writing up a battle plan, and was so eager to watch it play out, he decided that he will be present. So the following day, on top of a nearby high hill, seated upon a rock, the king watched. He was guarded by 2 men-at-arms holding a large shield in front of him to conceal him from any missile fire. Richard was getting impatient about the siege. As well as being in cover, he could not witness his plan unfold. He ordered for just a moment that his men-at-arms lower the shield, so he could watch with comfort. That is when a crossbowman in the castle of Chalus spotted him. His name? Well, it was Bernard de Gordon, or Jean Sabot, or even Pierre Bassel. His status? He was either a cook, a levee boy, a young footman, an old sergeant, or even a full-fledged knight. Regardless of who he was, or what he did next was legendary. Upon recognizing the King of England, he decided that he would shoot him. And so, he did. The bolt had struck Richard in the chest, though the wound itself was not fatal. This was partially due to that he was wearing some of his armor. A few days later, the castle was captured. Disregarding what he said prior to the siege about having everybody hung from the battlements, Richard instead offered pardons to every single defender, including the crossbowman. Contrary to what more contemporary historians write, where Richard's men flay the crossbowman alive and hang him from a nearby tree, instead what actually happens was he was given 100 shillings on top of it. Afterwards, the crossbowman vanishes from history. As for Richard, finding the gold in the castle pretty much untapped, and sadly not as great of a claim as it was made out to be, was still elated. He threw a wild party that lasted days on end, with all of the lords and knights that he brought with him to the siege, much to the protest of his empiric and physicians. A few nights later, Richard the Lionheart had succumbed to his crossbow injury.